All right, welcome to Building the Athlete. I'm your host, Scott Benson, and on a bright and early Saturday morning, we've got Stachia Reuwsaat Padilla, new last name for you, recently married. Stachia, welcome to the show. And quick just introduction of kind of who you are, where you've been, and where you're at.
So as Scott said, I'm Stachia. Well, I'm so happy to be here. So thank you for having me. I was born and raised in Blackhawk, South Dakota, and went to St. Thomas More, played softball through my junior year and track, went on to play and run track at Chadron State College, had a really great time there, took a year off. Then I went to Notre Dame for law school, and now I'm practicing law out in DC.
Okay. So let's talk about the first time we ever met, Stachia. I was a brand new track coach, first day of practice, and this little skinny girl comes up to me and hands me a piece of paper. And I said, what's this? And she said, those are all the track meets I'm going to miss because I'm going to be at a softball tournament, and said it in a very definitive way. And so that was your junior year, I believe. And you went on to have a great season, dealt with some injuries at the end, but then came back your senior season and killed it. At what point did the switch go on that, hey, maybe this track thing, there might be a future in it?
I don't think I even realized that track was an option after high school until we had a meet in Spearfish and I had a really big jump. And you told me this is a big deal. You can potentially do this at the next level. And it wasn't until that point that I had even considered track as an option in college.
So it was just all softball.
It was all softball.
Okay. So tell me about that. What drew you to softball?
It's just something I had done for a really long time, and I had a really good team. I enjoyed the team aspect of the sport. I enjoyed the schedule, the routine. It was comfortable. It was familiar. I loved the sport.
Okay. And so let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned you like the team aspect of it. Obviously, track and field's a lot different. Let's just talk about the two, I guess the two environments that you play in. You've kind of mentioned what you liked about the team sport. What did you like about an individual sport?
The best thing about an individual sport is at the end of the day, your success or your failures fall directly on you, and you're the only one accountable for it. So when you show up on the track and you have a really bad day, that's not the coach's fault. That's not the teammate's fault. Whatever went wrong has everything to do with you, and you're the only one that can change the outcome going forward. When you're successful on the track, that is a result of your coaching and your support system and you showing up mentally on the day to get it done. But there's no blame shifting, and it really helps you be more accountable for your actions, I think, in an individual sport, because at the end of the day, the result falls on you.
Yeah. Do you think in your personal athletic development, are you happy that you did both of those sports? Like, did it definitely shape you to have the team sport aspect and the individual?
I think it did, because while track is an individual sport, you're training with a team every single day and understanding how to uplift your teammates and support your teammates and engage in a way that's meaningful and helpful and be a good teammate, even in an individual sport, is something that I developed while I was playing softball.
Okay. You were recently inducted into the United States Track and Field Cross Country Coaches Association National Hall of Fame. How did that make you feel? Was that a surprise?
It was a surprise. It was really awesome. I mean, track, I lived and breathed track for probably 10 years of my life, and it's not something that I get to do a lot of right now in this stage of my life. And so it was really cool to have a moment where that got to be front and center again.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was obviously very well deserved. You were a two-time NCAA champion, I believe 9-time All-American, competed at the Olympic trials and the USA championships. So a career well worthy of Hall of Fame acknowledgement. And I'm sure there's going to be many more where that came from. So let's talk about that career. How on earth does this girl who maybe didn't look the part end up competing at a national level? We talk a lot on the show. We talk about genetics. We talk about mindset. You were one of those ones. I had this conversation with Tip Ryman about, as an NFL player, is there a switch that goes on? When you walk out on that field, are you a different person? And His comment was, absolutely. And I'm out there, I'm going to embarrass that man's family, something like that. It turned very serious very fast, which when I watched you compete, it was the same thing. It was the sweetest, most generous person off the track. And then when you stepped on that track, there obviously was a transformation into competition Stachia. So tell me what was that all about?
I mean, you as an athlete, you pour so much of yourself, your time, your effort, you like the blood, sweat, and tears into like reaching a specific goal. And the process to get to that goal, you need to be kind and generous and engage with others. But when it comes time to like bear the fruit of those efforts, you have to show up ready to go. And you have to be able to make that switch and like allow the work that you've put into your sport to show on the track. And the only way to do that is to, I guess, as you describe it, like flip a switch and show up mentally ready to compete.
Yeah. Yeah. And you not only showed up to compete, you showed up, I mean, for lack of better words, you showed up to destroy everybody. And so, how did you approach the mental side of it? How did you look at your competitors? Like, tell me just a little bit about mindset on a meet day.
I think one of the really important things for me, and this is probably something that you and I have spent a lot of time talking about, is you just have to show up, and especially in track, you have to show up and do your thing. You have to be focused on what it is that I came to do. These are the things that I need to execute today to be successful. And it doesn't matter who else is showing up to compete with you. It doesn't matter whether they're having the best day of their lives or the worst day of their lives. The only way that I can succeed is if I execute the things that I know I have to execute. And so you have to be able to mentally tune out everything else that's going on. You can't be worried about who else is there, and you have to focus on your goals and the things you need to do to be successful.
Yeah. And how did that change? How did that mindset change from the time you were a freshman in college to the time you were a senior in college?
I think as a freshman in college, I made the national meet for indoors. And going into college, I didn't even really understand that there was a national meet. I didn't understand the significance of what that was. I got there and I felt like I was really lucky to be there. I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like it was just this huge blessing and kind of maybe even a mistake that I got to be in that space and compete with those girls. And I think part of the reason that was because I hadn't set a goal to be there. I just kind of had stumbled upon it, as weird as that is to say. And so I didn't have priorities. I didn't have goals. Once I got there, I was just like, this is a great opportunity to be there. By the time I was a senior, I had very defined goals and I knew exactly what it was I wanted to achieve in that space. So when I got to a national meet, it wasn't, I'm just lucky to be here. It was, I've earned the right to be here. And I have the intention of putting on my best performance, and that performance can win me a national title. And so developing a goal in each space is really helpful. I also found that the goals that you have to feel a little unattainable. Like if your goal is just to All American, you're going to show up and you're not going to win a national title. You might All American, whatever you cap yourself with at a goal, it's very unlikely that you'll exceed that once you find yourself in that space. So goal setting was a big deal for me. And that's something that mentally shifted the longer that I competed.
So without a goal, essentially you were just a participant
Yes.
at an early age. So, and I talk about this a lot with goals because I think goals are tricky. So let's kind of dig into this a little bit. Goals are a result. I don't know if you remember competing under me, but I never set goals of we're going to win a state title or we're going to win a conference championship. I set goals of we're going to come to practice. We're going to go as hard as we can possibly go for 50 minutes, as quality of work as possible. And then the things at the end of the season become a result of a process of attaining those goals. And I think that's a kind of a problem with today's, especially high school students, is they set the big goal, but then there's no roadmap to get there. Talk to me a little bit about how you set goals, but then you developed a process along the way.
So I think it's important to have macro goals and micro goals. So like the macro goal might be to go to the state championship and win a state championship or to win a national title. But the micro goals, just like you're describing, are I have to show up and work towards that goal every single day. As soon as you set that goal, you have to also identify these are the biggest weaknesses or the biggest hurdles to me getting to that goal and achieving that goal. And I need a strategy for how I'm going to overcome each one of those over the course of the next 6 months. And then you have to show up and you have to execute that strategy every single day. And to do that, I think you need a support system. You need a coach that you can communicate with, that you are communicating with, what's working well, what's not working well. And as a young college athlete, those conversations can be really hard to have, especially if you feel like, I mean, you're a freshman, you haven't shown up, you haven't provided anything to the team. If you haven't competed yet, you don't really know what your value is on the team, but you still have to find the courage to have those conversations with your coach so that you can reach your micro goals and work towards those larger goals. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, and I don't know the answer to this question with you because you've always been a bit of an anomaly, and so I want to talk our way through this. But you were probably one of the most mentally strong athletes that I ever worked with, not just in a competition sense, but a showing up at practice and maximizing the time you had at practice to get better. But then at the same time, you were extremely athletic and could do some things, in the weight room that other kids, maybe not that they couldn't do, but they just chose not to do. So if we look at, mindset and then the athletic development side, which one of those do you think carried you further?
Mindset. So I can remember being like a sophomore or junior in college, and my coach told me that I was the clumsiest athlete he had ever worked with. Like, there was no reason that I should have experienced the success that I did, but I was just really stubborn, and I knew what it was that I wanted to work toward, and I was willing to make the sacrifices to get there. And I was incredibly linearly focused on the things that I wanted to do. And I think that helped.
Yeah. You say as a sophomore or junior in college, you were extremely clumsy, which I would agree, but then also disagree with that because you also did things in the weight room that most athletes could not do. And in my perspective, just watching you, there was a will there that I don't see with many other athletes and I've trained thousands of athletes. I've seen very few that it was almost like, you were trying to squat 300 pounds and you literally would will yourself to do it, or, to clean 150 pounds or 200 pounds. Like, I just have not seen that approach before. So you were doing things, athletically that most people couldn't do. Did you trip and walk into a wall once in a while? Maybe. But talk to me about that approach, with the training itself. You seem to get the most out of every session, whether it was a sprint, a run, a lift, a plyo. How did you approach that to where you could get that type of high level quality training every time?
I think probably that stems from a lot of the parenting style that my parents did. I mean, they were big believers in nothing worth doing is going to be easy. So everything worth doing is going to be hard, and you don't quit once you start something. They were also big advocates of, if you're going to do something, do it right. Don't come in and make a half-hearted effort. It's not worth your time. Come in, show up, do the thing, and then be done. And they demonstrated those skills every single day. They continue to demonstrate those skills. And so I think they just kind of raised me in a way that when you commit to something, you do it right and you put in all of your effort. And so I don't think the weight room was any different. I would show up to the weight room and I would want to do my best. I would show up to the weight room and I would see maybe a competitor we trained a lot with Tessa. Well, if Tessa can hang clean 150, I want to hang clean 155. Like, you show up and you compete in every single rep that it is you're doing. I also think the weight room for me was really addictive. It is a space that immediately gives you results. Like, you either can clean it or you can't clean it. And you can track that over time and you can see your growth over time in a way that you can't see as directly in a lot of other aspects of sport. So I just found that very addicting to be like, okay, last month we were doing the same thing, the same number of reps, and now I'm lifting 15 pounds heavier. I can see the growth, and I know that that's going to translate to how I'm competing on the track.
Yeah. Yeah. And I deal with this every day with lots and lots of kids that if you let them, they would come in and they would put the same amount of weight on every time. Unless they weren't feeling great, then they'd put less weight on. I mean, honestly, I see, I've been doing this for 16 or 17 years. I've trained thousands and thousands of athletes, and I see a decline in that work ethic. They don't want to get their hands dirty. They don't want to be uncomfortable. What do you attribute to that? Why do you think that is in today's society? Why do we seem to be going the wrong direction?
I think a lot of it is kids are afraid to fail. If I put on this extra weight, I might not be able to make the reps. And then I know that I haven't made the reps, and everyone else in the weight room knows that I haven't made the reps. And that's embarrassing or disappointing or whatever. But if you're motivated by a fear of failure, you've kind of missed the point. And I would just encourage kids to find the courage to show up and make the extra effort, because you might fail today, but you won't fail the next time. And failing is not, you might be embarrassed for 30 seconds, but if you learn something in that moment of failure that you can leverage into the next rep, you haven't actually failed. And it takes much more courage to show up and try to do the thing than it does to put on the same amount of weight, something you're comfortable with, you know that you can do. You're not going to grow that way. The only way to grow is to face failure and move past that.
Yeah, as an athlete, failure is a beautiful thing. It's honestly, it's the key to success. If we just showed up and won all the time, it probably wouldn't be quite as fun. It's putting in the work, and I talk about this a lot. It scares me, and it makes me sad that I'll watch high level kids that just give up. If the starting position's not readily available to them, and they're going to have to work to beat the kid in front of them, they'll call it. That's it. I'm done. They're quitting at an epidemic rate. And a lot of them, it's at a young age. It's 13, 14, 15 years old. I go back to the comment you made about parenting. I think that's such a big part of it, because I think so many of these young athletes are driven by parents to become athletes in the first place. And that's never going to work if you're out there doing it for somebody else. And, you kind of had those intrinsic goals and those intrinsic values, again, I know you've mentioned that parenting had a lot to do with that. Your parents taught you to work hard, but where do you think, that drive, that I'm going to, we're running 100, I'm going to crush this person. Where did that come from? Is that something that you're born that way, you're wired that way, or do you think that's developed over time?
I think to some extent you're probably born with it, but then you can hone it and develop it into something more than it was initially over time. I don't know. I think it's just something intrinsically that exists inside of you. And the longer that you spend time developing that and giving, the more competition reps that you get, the more able you are to access that and hone it and develop it into what it is you want it to be. Because it's not just something that appears on the track. I mean, if you have that mentality, it's going to impact your academics. If you apply that to your academics, you're going to want the best test scores on every test that you take. It's going to apply to your work. You're going to show up to a workspace and you're going to want to be the best at whatever it is you're doing in your workspace. It doesn't exist just in the athletic world. That urge to be the best, or whatever, I don't know how you describe this intrinsic desire, it permeates everything you touch in life.
Yes, for sure. So let me ask you this, transitioning, you're an attorney at a large law firm. Have you ever made a mistake?
Oh, yeah. I mean, as a young attorney, you're going to misfire more than once. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And my guess is you probably haven't made the same mistake multiple times.
That's the goal. Yes, that's definitely the goal.
Right. Because you learned from it and you became a better attorney because of it. So, one of my big philosophies in what I do is, and it's great if I get to, train a Stachia that's an NCAA champion, or a Tip Ryman that's in the NFL, or, these high level athletes. It's awesome when they come along, but that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this to set people up to be successful human beings and to have successful jobs, careers, be a better husband or wife, and all of those things, a better parent. And I believe that sports is such an awesome training ground for that. And so a lot of these kids who go through sports and they avoid discomfort at every turn, I think they're missing a lot of the really good lessons in sports. So how have you felt that, as a high level athlete, high level everything you've done, like what are the similarities you see between being a high level competitive athlete and being a high level competitive attorney?
A lot of the same, I mean, you show up to win, right? That's what attorneys do. And whether that's writing the best brief, taking the best deposition, scoring the most points in front of a judge, there's that same competitive aspect to practicing as an attorney that there is practicing in sport. But you also, I mean, my day-to-days vary unbelievably, and you need the mental endurance that you developed as an athlete in sport to kind of navigate through each of those days and to figure out how you can leverage the skill set that you have into the project that's sitting right in front of you. And a lot of the work is hard. A lot of the work is challenging and it's not fun and it's not necessarily easy or comfortable. And if you had the kind of personality where you're going to quit in the reps in sport, you're going to quit in the workspace as well. And you're not going to have that ability to persevere through the uncomfortable moments. And I see a lot of my peers that do struggle with that. So that's one thing. I think another thing that helps in sport, all of the same personalities and egos that you see in sport exist in the workplace. And as an athlete, you have so many more opportunities to deal with those different types of personalities and those different egos than a non-athlete does. And your ability to deal with those personalities translates into the workspace because you now have a background in how to react to those personalities and how to, if they're your boss, like appease them. And if they're your peers, manage them in a way that's really helpful. And a lot of people don't have that ability to just like assess a personality, assess that ego, and figure out how to best deal with it. And I think that being an athlete and constantly engaging with different types of competitors is a really valuable skill set.
Yeah, for sure. You said, it prepared you to have that mental endurance to get through that day. I'm sure very, very long days. But not only did being an athlete prepare you for that, you were a full time athlete, full time student. But on top of that, you were getting up early in the morning, and working a job as well. Isn't that true?
That's true. Yeah.
Okay, so let's just talk through that. Why on earth would anybody just stack the schedule even more? What possessed you to get a job while being a full-time athlete and a full-time student?
I think another thing my parents instilled in me is that like a desire to be independent and like working part-time in Shattering enabled me to have my own money to spend on the things that I wanted to spend on, like if I want to splurge and go for wherever, and I'm not having to ask for money for gas or anything else. And so I was able to like be independent, and there's a certain pride in being able to do things on your own that I think my parents really instilled in me, and that was something that I still possess today. And I also think that I have one of these personalities that doesn't do well being bored. I like kind of get quasi depressed if I don't have enough on my plate. I like to live in a state of semi chaos and be really, really busy. And that's the space that I thrive. If things are really, really busy and they're challenging, I'll step up to the plate. If I can just coast by, I get bored and unhappy.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing I can tell you that always sticks out to me. That tells me what type of human being that you are, because it's just something nobody else would do. They were too tired. Or what time did you have to get up in the morning?
I would sometimes work the opening shift, so I'd be up at 5:30 and I'd work from 5:45 to 9ish probably.
And then go to class and go to track and do all the other things. So I think I think that speaks so loudly to who you are. Let's talk a little bit about just actually your competition days, because there are a few things that I do remember. Obviously, back in high school, I remember your senior year. I think it was at the state meet, but we weren't at Sioux Falls. We were somewhere else, and you hammered a big long jump. I don't remember what it was. I think upper 18s, but I just to this day I can just hear the noise the sound of your foot on the board was like a gun going off. And I just remember the look on your face of like, what did I just do? Take me back to a high school senior and tell me what was going through your head. How did that feel?
I think I'll backtrack just a little bit farther. So when I first started training with you, I can remember it was after one of our track sessions. I looked you in the eye and I said, Scott, I want to run the fastest. I want to be the fastest 100-meter girl in the state next year. And it was the first time that I had ever voiced that out loud. And you had no reason to believe that that was possible at that point. But you looked me dead in the eyes and you said, okay, this is how we can get there. And over the course of the next year, I think that was as a junior, we developed a plan and a game plan to get there. And we worked towards that goal the entire year. And so then at the state meet, it was just an opportunity to pull together all of the things that we had done together and execute it. And I was shocked at the big jump. I didn't know that that was possible. And I just wanted to be there and to do my best and to put points on the board for the team.
Yeah. And I believe you won 4 events in that meet and you were the MVP of the meet. I said, another memory of mine is the 4 gold medals, the MVP. That's really cool. And we won the state title. But what I do remember most about that meet is we were maybe not supposed to win that state title. Sioux Falls Christian was stacked and we were, we could win, but everything was going to have to go our way. And I remember, and I don't remember the young lady's name, but she got hurt in one of the races. And essentially she was their best sprinter. She had to withdraw from the meet. And I don't remember what was going on, but I remember I couldn't find you. And I was looking all over for you. And finally somebody said, I think she's over there. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And you were over in Sioux Falls Christian's team's tent and you were praying with the young lady that got hurt. And again, there was one of those defining moments that made me just realize, not as a track athlete, but as a human being, you were different. So talk me through that, because that is a very, I don't know, I wouldn't even call it mature. It's obviously mature, but that's something above and beyond that, 99% of high school kids wouldn't have done that. They probably would have been thinking, oh, she's hurt. Here's my chance. So take me through that experience.
I think just on a very human level, we had worked so hard to be there, and I knew what that state meant to me, and I knew that she was a top competitor, so I knew what would have cost her to be injured and how painful that must have been. And I think it was just important for me to offer some support to her in that moment, because it's got to be one of the most challenging moments, especially as a high school athlete, that you've had to live through. And so I felt like it was important to let her know that I understood that. And I don't know.
Wow. I thought that was one of the coolest things I've seen in sports, and just one of the most beautiful gestures that an athlete has ever made to their competitors. So I'll always remember that. And, as you get older, like me, you start to forget about the performances, and those are the type of things that stick with you. So I just thought that was a really cool thing. And then I remember, I don't remember what year it was of college for you, but you had not been running a lot. And I think they put you in the 100 meters at the conference championships. And I think you ended up winning it and running an 11.3 or something in 100, which you hadn't been running that much of. And I think you went on to run it at nationals. But what's the mindset there where you get stuck in something you're not really used to doing, and then you just go out and outperform everybody?
It was not an 11.3. I think it was like an 11.6 or an 11.7. But I mean, they needed us to score points at the conference meet is what it was. And I liked the 100-meter dash, but we weren't running it very often because, the more races you run, there's a risk of injury. And we had long jump goals that we were trying to reach. So I did not run very often. But it's the same thing. You show up and you have a job to do. And I had no idea that I would run that fast. I didn't even know that I could be that fast. But that's what it took that day to get the job done. And so that's what we did.
Yeah. So it was just typical Stachia doing her thing,
I guess.
Let's talk a little bit about going from small town Podunk, Shadron, Nebraska to Notre Dame Law School. That had to been, there I don't know if it could have been any different. And talk a little bit about that experience. How do again, now you're going up, now you're a freshman again. And when I say freshman, I don't mean a freshman in law school. I mean a freshman mentality now. You're back down at the bottom and, you're going probably from Division II to now you're facing elite competition in law school. What did that look like to you?
It was hard mentally. I can remember the first day of orientation, I showed up and everybody's talking about how they went to Harvard or Stanford or Columbia for their undergrads, and their dad has a law office in Times Square, New York, and all of the stuff. I don't have any lawyers in the family. I've never been to some of these big cities. It felt to me, I can remember very distinctly in the first couple of weeks feeling like, I don't know why I'm here. Again, I feel like I don't belong. These people are not like me. I have nothing in common with these people. I don't understand the world that they've come from. And that was really, really hard. And something that I did that was not advisable was I went to the track program and I said, here's my resume. Can I help coach? And they said, sure, you can be a volunteer assistant coach. And so 5 or 6 days a week, I went and spent 1 to 2 hours with the track kids. And that was home base for me. Like, this is a space that I'm familiar with. I understand athletes. I can come home to the track space and step away from all of these baby attorneys, we'll call them, that are doing their thing. And I feel like I don't have much in common with them. And it really helped me find my feet when I got to Notre Dame. And I will say, I just kind of executed a strategy where I felt like I didn't belong. So I was going to show everyone there that I did belong. And I was going to put my head down and I was going to work, and I wasn't going to get in a group and talk about how hard law school was, or sit in a room where everybody thinks they know everything. And I just studied a lot by myself, which doesn't work for everyone, but I just put in the time to show myself that I deserve to be there.
Yeah. You got to tell the story, and I can't remember it, but it was at one of those welcomings and there was a guy that was bragging to everybody about his pedigree. Do you know what I'm talking about? You got to tell that story.
I was standing in the corner of the room because I'm not very social, and I saw this man from Harvard, and he had a routine. He would walk up to someone and he'd go, "Hi, my name is so and so. Where did you go to school?" And they would say wherever they went to school, and he'd go, "Oh, well, that must be a really small school I'm not familiar with because I just don't know it. I went to Harvard." And every person he talked to, I could just see physically deflate. And he was just out there to crush people. He was just cruel. And so I watched this happen probably 3 or 4 times. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give this a go. And so I walked up to him and I introduced myself, and he said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Well, I went to Chadron State College for undergrad." And he went, "I just don't know where that's at. It must be a really tiny school." And I was like, "It was. It was." And he said, "Well, I went to Harvard." And I went, "Harvard? I've never heard of that. Where's that? We both got to the same place? That's crazy." And then I just walked away. Like, it was just hard to watch him be cruel to people on the very first day without any cause. I thought that was so unnecessary.
And there's competition, Stachia.
It just made me mad that he was being so cruel to people.
Yeah. So you had mentioned when you were at Notre Dame that getting back around the track program kind of helped, give you some stability in your life or put you around something that you knew and were comfortable with. Do you have a future there somewhere? Are you going to come back to track and field someday?
I hope so. I think so. I coached for a year while I was out here clerking at a high school, and I loved it. I really, really did. I don't think it's sustainable with the job that I have now, the hours that it requires. I think kids respond really well and kids deserve someone that's committed and able to show up for them regularly, and they respond really well to that. And I just can't give that to a program right now. So I have not been coaching, but I think it would be great to do so in the future.
Yeah, yeah. And the sport needs people like you. You would be probably the most overqualified coach in the history of the world, but that's okay. So One other thing I wanted to talk about is there's a hole in track and field when it comes to development at a high level. I just discussed this on one of my other shows with Jeremy Fisher, and he talked about how broken USA track and field is. You know, our only development system in the United States is NCAA. And then once you're done with that, you're on your own. And you experienced this as an athlete that wanted to continue to compete. You know, you were kind of on the borderline of, you know, could you bring in a sponsor? But there's really no roadmap out there to help athletes. You know, honestly, an Olympic medalist, you know, they're probably not going to see that type of success until their late 20s, even possibly into their early 30s. And by that time, most of our athletes have long retired. What do you think, or how do you think that that problem could be addressed and, you know, potentially resolved?
Oh, that's interesting. It's definitely a problem as far as addressing or resolving it. I know that there's a training center in California. What is that called?
There's not anymore.
Oh, I didn't know that it had closed down.
No, because Jeremy Fisher kind of ran that, and it's not an Olympic training center anymore.
I mean, the athletes need access to coaches that are willing to work with them, and they need access to facilities. Those are kind of the two big hurdles. Well, I guess maybe those are one of the hurdles. The second hurdle is just financially. How are they going to support themselves during that? I mean, the year that I took off, I moved to Colorado to work with my coach who was coaching up there, and I was working at Home Depot, and it just was a hard year. It was really hard for me to justify working part-time at Home Depot with a college degree and barely making any money to compete. I mean, there needs to be some sort of support system there. I don't know what that support system would look like.
Yeah. And I had a conversation with a gentleman in Saudi Arabia, I think 2 shows ago, and he works with the Olympic development program there, and he has all the resources in the world and doesn't have the pool of athletes that we have, and then looks at our system and you know, understands how broken it is, and that you know, you need those development years, you need. And he said, you know, he was the British national high jump coach for a lot of years, and they wouldn't get a lot of money, but they'd get enough money to live and train. He just, you know, he's amazed that there's nothing in the United States. And I don't know how many, you know, how far we need to sink in the medal count at the Olympics before the government steps in and says, we're going to subsidize this program, or corporate America. You know, I don't know how to do it, but I know that it needs to be done. It's been done, needed to be done for a long time. I mean, even, you know, 35 years ago when I came out, I wanted to continue to compete, and other than going to Europe, there really wasn't any options. And that's a massive undertaking for a 22 or 23-year-old kid to just up and move. So I wish there'd be some type of resolution there. I don't see it in the near future, but I think, you know, we have definitely, the world has caught up in a lot of areas of track and field. And maybe as that continues to happen, the government will get involved. It's the sport that we both did, it's difficult to watch good athletes retire too early. Okay, so here's how we finish shows here. You have to go through a speed round of questions. Okay, so we got to think quick and answer quicker. Okay,
Okay.
are you ready to roll?
How many questions?
You don't get to know that. That's like asking when the workout's going to be done.
All right.
You know better than that. All right, I'll give you a little bit of time to answer, just not very much. Okay, what was the favorite meet you ever competed in?
I loved the last chance meets in college.
Okay. What's something that drove you nuts about a teammate?
Practice All-Americans.
What do you wish you could tell college Stachia?
Just keep trying. Just keep showing up.
Best advice a coach ever gave you?
It's not a failure if you can use it to motivate you towards the next thing.
Favorite pre-competition meal? What is one word that teammates would use to describe you?
Committed.
Long work day. Are you going coffee or Red Bull?
I don't drink coffee or drink Red Bull.
That's a pretty good answer. Hardest workout you ever completed?
300, 150, 150.
One book every athlete should read. What do you miss most about track and field?
Just the confidence knowing that you can show up and your body can do something really, really special.
Good answer. All right, Stachia, that was awesome.
Thanks for having me.
great to wake up and have my coffee talking to you. I have great memories of our time together, and you taught me as much as I ever taught you, I'm sure. And it's been awesome to watch the development and watch, what you've become in this world. And I look forward to continuing to watch. So thank you for being on.
Thanks, Scott.
Have a great day.
You too.